social distancing at the chamber. It's a Tuesday night edition of Happy Hour with Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor, as always, joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. How you doing, Glenn?
Good to see you. I have my favorite T-shirt, my Orakiva shirt, Orakiva, Israel.
Well,
great town.
Good.
Suburb of Tel Aviv, sort of. Great town.
Shout out to the Tel Aviv suburbs. Okay, we knew this was coming, but it's official today. Governor Ducey announcing that in partnership with the federal government, standing up 2 testing locations in areas of need in Maryvale and South Phoenix. On Twitter, the governor's office reports that these locations will provide up to 5,000 tests per day for 12 consecutive days. This will serve up to 60,000 Arizonans. Testing begins Friday. You can go online to sign up. Glenn, something you've talked about, though, results that as a result of the nasal swab will be available 24 to 48 hours later via an online portal. This is what you've been talking about.
It's really great progress. We talked about it last week, Garrick. The headline from last week's press conference should have been testing, all caps, 3 exclamation points. That has been ramping up massively in the state, and you just gave some really good examples. 5,000 a day, 48 within 24 48 hour turnaround. That's really good. And as we've discussed with some of the other work going on, so we've got the National Guard, we have Arizona State University, we have Sonora Quest. We will, by the end of the month, be well over 30,000 tests a day, and by the end of August, over 60,000 tests a day. And now we're at probably 13,000 tests a day. So we're making a lot of progress in that area.
All right, so to double back on something you just mentioned, though, we talked a little bit about it last week. Free COVID-19 saliva testing. This is the non-invasive version. Basically, you're spitting into a straw that goes into a test tube. You can go on azhealth.gov and sign up for testing with this ASU program. Another good sign of progress.
Well, instead of jamming something up your nose, you're just spitting into a tube. That's also really good, because what ASU has been working on and innovating is going to get us to a much less invasive test. And, the innovation that's happening in the testing area is going to be very helpful, because I've been thinking a lot about this. A lot of the things in terms of living with this virus, which is the stage we're in, and I don't believe we're ever going to leave it, because I don't believe people will allow, regardless of governments or what have you, people want some level of ability to participate in the economy responsibly. The testing is the linchpin of everything. If you have testing, you could contact trace who has it. If you have testing, you could better protect the most vulnerable, the elderly. If you have testing, you can, with quick turnaround, you could test teachers when they're in the classroom, so that those who may be exposed can quickly be put in a safe place away from others. So it's testing, and the state's really making a lot of progress here, Garrick.
And Glenn, is that your concern when you have a long lag time between the test and the results? Is that asymptomatic person could be out in the community?
Asymptomatic or even symptomatic. If you're not getting your test back for 7 or 10 days, and then someone calls you to contact trace after 10 days. Garrick, I don't know about you. I don't even know what month I'm in. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time. The thought of saying going back 8 days who I was with or what I was doing is almost impossible. So it's the number of tests. I feel very good about the quality. So it's really the number and the turnaround. An important point here is that, people like to point fingers. Well, it's a global pandemic. There's not just a nationwide competition for all of the elements that make up a test. There's an international competition. So not all of the elements are necessarily even made in the great old US of A. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say this. I feel like we're on a path right now where we're going to be above par from most other states. in terms of what we're able to do on testing. And I do feel we're doing everything we possibly can to ramp it up and to get a speedy outcome. And it just, these things take more time than any of us would like. I mean, we'd all agree, everyone would agree, it's you need to have a much faster turnaround than has been the case the past few weeks. But it is definitely turning in the right direction very rapidly.
You mentioned that if we build up testing capacity and lab results, we could use this to test teachers, which means getting kids back in the classroom. So over the weekend, Robb had a column in the Republic about how to get kids back to school. And I texted you and I wondered if he was channeling you, because it's basically he hit the points that you've been talking about. Let's push the date out. Let's make sure that we're doing this safely and not putting people in uncomfortable. I think the term he used was don't put people in uncomfortable situations, which is something I think you've used those words. And the third one is use this as an opportunity to rethink the entire school day, school calendar, the entire enterprise. I don't know if you and Bob are sharing a brain, but it sounds like a lot of the things that you have been talking about.
Well, Robb's a lot smarter than I am, and he's one of the great policy minds the state has ever produced. He had really a lot of good thinking in that column. What I think we all agree on, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, is that it's far, far better to have K through 12 students have the in-class experience. There's a lot of, it's not just the academics, it's the safety, it's food security for a lot of kids. It's even for a lot of parents, it's important for their own work routines. But we have to do it safely, and we also have to we have to do it in a fashion that has compassion for others. We all have different risk tolerances. Even in our own office, there are some that feel much more comfortable going out and doing a meeting socially distanced with masks than others, and we're going to respect that. Period. We need to have that same approach on the education side, and it seems that we start schools very, very early in the state. In Robb's view and in my view, it's okay to push that back a little bit this year. Because what we want to do is to make sure we open it right, open the schools the correct way, with that in-person experience that people will feel comfortable with, and that sticks. So I thought it was a really a column that was a must read, and I hope that our policymakers all read it and incorporate that into their thinking.
Glenn, you know that there's emerging research, it's certainly not settled, about the extent that this disease affects children, but also the extent that children can spread it. But something we all have to be cognizant of is the person at the front of the classroom is an adult, and an adult that might have their own challenges at home, might live with an immunocompromised person, an elderly person. It's a whole new set of challenges that we have to think about in the return to school.
Yes, and we also have to think about, we do have to get those numbers down, way down. I mean, so for our schools, for people and parents and teachers and administrators, in my opinion, to feel comfortable, we have to get those numbers down. If we had the numbers that we had a couple months ago, I believe it would be a much different conversation. And we are doing that. We're taking the steps that we need to. Right now, it's just simply impossible to have bars, nightclubs, that type of activity open when you have the virus out there in such a prevalent way. And I'll say, Garrick, we have to also just watch out, because California, we've seen this movie before. California has already enacted stricter provisions.
Yeah.
I would not recommend at this point that we do that in Arizona. However, we are a mobile country. People could get into a car from Los Angeles and they could drive, and they'll be in Phoenix within 6 hours. They could do the same from Las Vegas. And we have to be very, very careful that if we are going to have people visiting from other places, that we don't get into the situation that we did about 4 or 5 weeks ago, where Scottsdale, about 5 miles from where we are, where I am, became Party Central USA. We just cannot have that. Because if we do have that, it's going to be very, very difficult to get our economy back open. It's going to be very difficult for all of our other employees outside of bars to stay open as people from those environments transmit the disease if there is an outbreak. And it's going to be very, very difficult to have schools open. Look, I love bars. I can't wait to get to a bar again with a lot of people. But right now, with the numbers in Arizona, that's going to be something that's going to be sometime in the future before we could get back to that activity that many of us, including myself, really enjoy.
It's a reminder of the interconnected nature of this economy. We've talked about we can't have an economy firing on all cylinders if our healthcare system is overwhelmed. It's also difficult to argue that we're going to have an economy on all cylinders if we can't open the schools.
Well, and your comments about the healthcare system are very important, and our hospitals have done a phenomenal job. And again, our doctors, our nurses, the personnel in our hospitals, they're the heroes of keeping everything together. Those numbers, that we've been able to keep the numbers away thus far from surge, which could impact the quality of care. It could. We haven't gotten to that point. And, a big reason is because I do believe that the governor took action a few weeks ago, and even really 3 or 4 weeks ago, on allowing the cities and localities to have mandatory mask policies that are definitely having a positive impact in terms of reducing the spread. But the numbers are still way too tight. And, while we've seen the last few days, the overall numbers in ICU and acute beds go down, every day we have seen an increase in ICU beds and inpatient beds for COVID-19 patients. So we're not out of the woods yet, but I do feel that we've made some real progress, and we're just going to have to keep at it.
Right. Yeah. And Glenn, you look at the numbers on a regular basis. The occupancy rate is going up of these beds, but is the positivity rate, we've seen some good news in that regard?
The positivity rate has been going down a little bit. It reached a point that was ludicrously high.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some days it was well over 25%. You're supposed to be way too high. I believe you're supposed to be well under 5%. New York now is probably at 1 or 2%. But we're definitely seeing some positive trends there, but from a way too high point, which means we're also not having enough testing. But again, that is changing rapidly. You mentioned you started the program, 5,000 tests a day for 12 days.
Yep.
That's a lot of tests, and we're just going to continue to see a ramp up throughout the state, and tests that are available and now appropriately focused in some of the low income communities that have not had the same testing numbers that other parts of the state have had.
Right, go where it's needed most. All right, Glenn, that puts a Tuesday night edition in the books. Thanks as always.
Thanks, Garrick.